thank my friend from Florida for those words and comfort that they will hopefully bring. I think most Americans, especially those that knew anybody who fought for our country in Afghanistan, are aware of how poorly things went a year ago when the Biden administration, it appeared, tried to emulate the disastrous leaving of Vietnam, when so much was left behind, including our allies. Like in Vietnam, allies were left there, many of whom were killed. Of course, 13 of our servicemen were killed that never should have been and did not need to be if we had left properly. As some of our Northern Alliance allies, part of the Afghan people that fought for us and with us beginning in October of 2001, about a month after 9/11, many died fighting for us and with us. We helped provide them weapons, and we had about 300 or so special operations people that were embedded with them, and they took the fight to the Taliban. And within 6 months, there was no organized Taliban left in Afghanistan. Some of them fled to Pakistan or other surrounding countries, but they'd been defeated. With the great help, General Dustin was the commander who was overall commander of the forces fighting, the Afghan forces fighting against the Taliban. But President Biden and his advisors, for whatever reason, decided it was better to leave billions and tens of billions of dollars of equipment and weapons for our enemies to use against our allies and probably one day use against the United States itself. We saw this kind of disastrous exit from Vietnam. Estimated 2 million or so people who helped us, were sympathetic to us, were killed in Southeast Asia. Just thought surely we'd never be that stupid and that calloused to allow allies to be harmed like that. I met numerous times with a few other members of Congress. We met with some of our Northern Alliance allies. Of course, there was the great hero, Afghan hero of the war between Afghanistan and Russia. Unfortunately, our intelligence agencies here in the U.S. did not pick up on the importance of Shah Massoud, Lion of Panjshir, being assassinated by Taliban within day and a half or so of 9/11 about to occur. Had they been awake and not asleep at what was going on, they would have anticipated the Taliban was about to do something to cause great harm to the United States. And they knew, once we realized that the attack originated from Afghanistan, that we would be coming and would be looking for allies, and we would certainly want Massoud and his brother and all those others who wanted the Taliban gone, we would be using them and working with them to eliminate the Taliban. So the Taliban eliminated that great Afghan hero before 9/11. And in numerous meetings with our Afghan allies, they've been saying for a decade or more, look, going back to the Obama administration days, they were telling a few of us, look, we know you've got to leave at some point. We know that. But what we're begging is that you help us amend the Constitution that you forced on us. And yeah, we like that it's based on Sharia law, but this is a country that's perfectly suited for the federalist system where you have so much power in your country, in the states, in our country, they said in the provinces. But right now, the Constitution that you gave us, forced on us, the president appoints the governors, appoints the mayors, appoints the chiefs of police, and it is a system made for corruption. And it sounded to me like the way things were going over there, the times I went to Afghanistan, that and you were hearing the reports of what was going on, whether it was Karzai or Ghani, that they may well have taken a great deal of money like the old Roman days, and whoever gave the most money would get the best governorship. They were appointing governors that didn't even live in the province that they were going to be governor over. And they were not allowed to have militias like they wanted. And as Zia Massoud told me more than once in trips to meet with them, and in fact, the Obama administration did not want me meeting with our allies. They did what they could to keep me from meeting with our allies, even though the Obama administration basically threw them to the curb and was anxious to work deals with the Taliban. In fact, the colonel there at the embassy in Afghanistan had told me, I told him I have a meeting with Massoud, Dustin, numerous of our allies. And he said, we can't let you do that. I said, I'm not asking you for a ride. Massoud is sending a vehicle, and they will make sure that I'm protected. They're not going to let me be killed because they want to protect the relationship. And the colonel said, well, we're not authorized to let you do that. And I said, you see the gate over there? I'm going, when the car gets here, I'm going and I'm going to get in that car and I'm going to go meet with our allies. I know the Obama administration, they have rejected any type of relationship with those people that fought for us and with us, lost family members, but I am going to go meet with the allies that have sacrificed so much to help us, help both of us. Well, they ended up getting a car, and I was told before the vehicle that Massoud was sending that we let Massoud know we're going to bring you there. Michelle Bachmann went out there with me. She had not met them before, and Mike Burgess went out there. But all they wanted was for us to help them fix the Constitution we forced on them. They needed a federalist form of government, and that's what they said. You know, if you will If you'll help us get that, see, we can elect our own governors, we can elect our own mayors, pick our own police chiefs, and then each province will have a militia, because when you leave, the Taliban is going to try to take back over, and then they'll eventually want to hit you again. But if we are allowed to elect our own governors and mayors, we will be able to have a militia in each province. So when you leave, then we'll be able to band together and whip the Taliban again. But if you leave it like it is, and you keep negotiating with the Taliban, which the Obama administration had been doing basically the whole administration, then we're all going to be killed, and then they will hit you again, and then you'll want to come back to Afghanistan and try to find allies, but we'll all be dead, and no one will be crazy enough to help you again. So just help us elect our own governors. I said, what makes you think we could help you get your Constitution amended? It's your Constitution now. He said, well, you're paying most of our government's budget, annual budget. So if you say Constitution needs to be amended, or we're not going to pay this year's budget for you, then that will be amended, and we will be able to protect ourselves from the Taliban whenever it is you leave. Well, and I know Secretary Pompeo also negotiated with the Taliban, but there's no way President Trump would have ever allowed our troops to leave and leave tens of billions of dollars worth of equipment for our enemy to someday use against us. Wouldn't do that. And on the other hand, the Taliban knew that if they did anything to our folks during a projected move coming back to the United States, that President Trump would bomb them back to the Stone Age. So they would not have done what they did. They perceived America to be weak under this administration, and we lost 13 soldiers, military members that should never have been lost. So as if that wasn't enough damage, see this article, I just saw it today, it's dated September 12th, Daniel Greenfield. And it says, White House Democrats have a history of fighting against terror victims using suing Islamic terrorists. The Obama administration battled American terror victims who were suing the PLO. In 2015, after they won a $218 million judgment against the terror group, the PLO, Blinken, then only a deputy secretary of state, intervened, claiming that the lawsuit threatened, quote, several decades of U.S. foreign policy, unquote. But now, President Biden is fighting 9/11 victims, that's American victims, on behalf of the Taliban. We have this administration helping the Taliban fight in court against 9/11 victims. The rhetorical question arises to the Biden administration, whose side are you on? You're helping the Taliban. The article goes on, at stake are billions of dollars being held by the Afghan Central Bank Fund in the United States. A decade ago, 9/11 families sued the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and Iran. The court found that the Islamic terrorists were responsible, and a judgment of $6 billion was handed down. That's for the 9/11 families. The verdict was described as symbolic at the time. CBS News commented that, quote, it would be near impossible to collect any damages, especially from the Taliban or Al-Qaeda, unquote. But that was before Biden turned over Afghanistan to the Taliban. Since Afghanistan has assets in this country, in the U.S., including $7 billion in bank funds, it's now entirely possible to collect that $6 billion money. Or it would be if the guy who let the Taliban take over wasn't also in the White House. Biden officially announced that he was splitting the $7 billion between the families of the victims and a trust fund to provide humanitarian aid for the people of Afghanistan. In other words, we're going to help the Taliban out to make the people of Afghanistan feel better about the Taliban being in charge. That's what's going on here. Biden officially announced that he was going to make that split. The $3.5 billion was placed in a separate trust that would be, quote, separate and distinct from the around $800 million the Biden administration has already spent on aid to Afghanistan. Officials admitted that the money could actually be used for matters other than humanitarian aid. In other words, it could be used to help the Taliban itself, the people that killed 3,000 or so Americans on 9/11, the worst attack on American soil in American history. And this administration is making sure they get billions of dollars. Article goes on, the media headlined it as, quote, Biden frees frozen Afghan billions for relief, common 9/11 victims, unquote. But a Biden official admitted that it was done to stop 9/11 families from getting access to the money. As a Lawfare blog post noted, quote, the administration, talking about the Biden administration's plan, would insulate nearly half of the Afghan assets at issue from these attachment efforts. What Biden actually did was take the money off the table for the 9/11 victims, and it gets worse. Secretary of State Blinken claimed that the administration, quote, will continue to support these victims and their families, recognizing the enduring pain they have suffered at the hands of terrorists, including those who operated from Afghanistan prior to the September 11 attacks. These victims and their families should have a full opportunity to set forth their arguments in court. This article says Blinken, like his boss, lied. While the 9/11 families would have their claims, quote, heard in court, unquote, neither Biden nor Blinken mentioned that the administration would be advocating against these 9/11 victims. On the same day as Biden's executive order reserving $3.5 billion for the terrorists, his Justice Department filed a statement of interest in court arguing that the judgment for the victims of terrorism was too large and that actually turning over the money, the $3.5 billion to them, or all $7 billion to them, would interfere with the Biden administration's foreign policy in Afghanistan. Like we have a policy in Afghanistan? No. All the rare earth minerals the things that could have paid us back for ridding the Afghan people of the Taliban, well, not only were they allowed to come back and take over, but they made deals with China to let them have the rare earth minerals. In other words, this administration just exponentially magnified the loss in life, assets, money that they lost America. Now a magistrate judge has repeated back most of the DOJ's arguments, ruling against the 9/11 families who were laying claim to the other half of the money. Judge Sarah Netburn's arguments closely mirror the contradictory positions of Biden and the DOJ, and they reveal the underlying corruption behind the ambiguous status of Afghanistan's central bank. Judge Netburn, like the Biden administration, contends that the Afghan bank enjoys sovereign immunity because the country itself was not sanctioned as a terrorist state. Only the Taliban was. And the Taliban, once again, control Afghanistan. That's irrelevant, according to the judge, because Biden hasn't recognized the reality that this is actually the case. Banks don't enjoy sovereign immunity, and neither do the Taliban. Judge Netburn and President Biden act as if there were some entity representing Afghanistan that's not the Taliban. That position might make sense if they were backing a resistance movement to the Taliban, but they're not. It was sad enough that this administration's mishandling of negotiating, we should have been negotiating with our allies to leave the country in their hand with an amended constitution. And instead, we left it in the hands of our enemies. And as some of our allies there have said, the day will come when the Taliban will hit America again. Next time, it will be harder. They've got more money. They've got tens of billions of American assets to utilize or sell and use the money. But the difference will be this time, after America loses thousands of lives at the hands of the Taliban, and America comes to Afghanistan seeking allies to help them defeat the Taliban, as we did in 2001 and 2, we'll all be dead, those of us who were America's allies, and no one will be stupid enough to trust the United States again. What a tragic, horrific blunder by this administration. Now, the exit was the blunder, but turning against the 9/11 victims' families, that's not a blunder. That's very intentional by this administration. Being much more helpful and sympathetic to the Taliban, who were terrorists that hit this country and have never apologized and will never apologize, instead of standing against them and making sure they never commit terrorist acts again, this administration wants to be sure they get billions of dollars, like the Obama administration was ensuring that Iran got, the largest state sponsor of terrorism. So I guess at least we can say that's a good thing. This administration, the Biden administration, is at least being consistent with the Obama administration. The Obama administration helped the Taliban. The Obama administration did not help the 9/11 families. And now the Biden administration is working against the 9/11 families, and they are helping Actually, they're helping the Taliban with more money than the Taliban has ever had. An amazing development. And if things don't get turned around soon, where we have wiser administration next time, have Republicans in the majority come January, that helps get back to being or using more common sense, then this will be an horrific chapter in the book Rise and Fall of the United States of America, and how we helped our enemy ultimately destroy ourselves because of some misguided, harebrained idea that you could give your enemy billions of dollars, give them tens of billions of dollars of military equipment and weapons, and think you were going to come out just fine on the other side.